Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
The push alert hit at 2:17 in the morning, sharp. Activity detected. Riverside cabin. Back entry. I was in the middle of a freight rebate spreadsheet, staring at line items and rate tiers, brain fried. That alert lit my spine up like jumper cables. I hadn't told Catherine I'd added 6 motion sensors and 3 low-power cams to the cabin last month. Solar, wireless, tight motion zones just around the doors. Discreet, quiet, like I do everything. The feed opened grainy and green, night vision mode. At first I thought maybe it was a raccoon or a busted branch. Then I saw a silhouette move through our kitchen. Quick note. Before we continue, share in the comments which city or country you're listening from. It helps us see where you're tuning in from and figure out the best time to post new stories. Thanks. Now let's get into it. Broad shoulders. Steady gait. This wasn't a raccoon. Wasn't a neighbor chasing a leaky hose. This was a man who knew where the table was, knew the space, like it was his. He set down a tote on the table. A moment later, Catherine's hands came into the frame. I recognized her rings. Then they hugged. Not quick, not casual. It was close. Familiar. She leaned in like she knew his scent. My chest went hot, then numb. I scrubbed through the feed frame by frame, trying to catch a face. His ball-cap brim and the hallway shadow kept him clean. Too clean. On the table, I spotted a shaving kit, a rolled-up flannel, heavy boots, and 2 prescription bottles in a Ziploc. All of it, men's gear, personal, like someone was moving in. I zoomed tighter. Catherine tilted toward him. Not stiff, not flinching, like she trusted him, knew him. My gut bottomed out. I felt the floor under me shift, like the whole loft itself moved. I shut the laptop by 5 in the morning. I didn't sleep. At 7:10 in the morning, when she padded past our bedroom in a towel, hair wet, humming something off-key, I told her I had vendor issues in Iowa. That was a lie. Truth is, I co-founded a niche SaaS company for agricultural co-ops, finance tools, route management, rebate logic. Not sexy, not flashy, but it works. And it's predictable. Predictability helps me sleep. Control makes me breathe easier. Secrets keep things neat. And Catherine never asked questions when I traveled. Never asked why I stayed up all night looking at spreadsheets, or what kind of vendor problems happen at 2 in the morning in Iowa. I thought back to Father's Day when I was 17. My last one with my dad before the blow-up. I'd waited on the porch with a cheap grill set from Walgreens, something dumb I'd saved for. He never showed. Later I found out he'd taken his new wife to Atlantic City instead. I remember sitting on that porch thinking, don't ever get blindsided again. Not by anyone. So I told myself the cameras were for safety. Trespassers, busted pipes, a busted heater. But watching that hug on the grainy screen, I knew exactly what I'd built. I'd made a trap. For her. For me. And I walked straight into it. I saved the clip into a folder labeled Utilities. Like that made it neutral. Like that made it data, not betrayal. Then I went back to my spreadsheet. Tried to work. But my fingers kept missing the keys. I didn't say a word when Catherine walked back into the loft that morning, humming like nothing had shifted. I stayed bent over the laptop, pretending to fix a payment flow that didn't need fixing. She kissed my temple, dropped her bag near the front door and said, "I'll shower before the heat kicks in." That was her. Soft-spoken, gentle hands, stubborn in a way that worked better in the woods than it ever would in Manhattan. She was 29, a grant writer for some nonprofit that helped seniors stay in their homes out in the counties. No fame, no spotlight, just paperwork, patience, and tenacity. She didn't need much to be proud of her work. That's something I never really understood. Doing a job for purpose, not power. The cabin changed her. I saw it almost immediately. We found that place about 1.5 years ago. Cedar siding, a roof sharp enough to slice snow, and a front porch that sagged like it had a story to tell. 2 hours out if you didn't hit construction. She said it smelled like childhood. I said it looked like rot. But she smiled and ran her hand along the door frame like she already knew every nail in it. I told her she could have it as a project. My calendar was clogged with vendor audits and harvest logistics and co-op expansion calls. She grinned and said, "I'll take it," like she meant it. She went out most weekends, sometimes Thursday to Sunday, said she could think better there, that the quiet made people's lies louder, said the trees helped her hear what folks weren't saying. She got tight with the local crowd real quick, especially the crew at the community center. Came back with stories about busted furnaces and Ms. Rhonda's third knee surgery, and a guy named Curtis, who only spoke in baseball metaphors. She'd walk in, hair smelling like wood smoke, hands rougher than when she left. She made coffee like it was sacred and said things like, "Gage fixed the fence again," like I was supposed to know who that was. Gage Rowland, local contractor, showed up in stories more often than I liked, dropped off lumber, fixed a sagging gate, delivered firewood without asking. Decent to the core, she called him. That's what she always said. Steady as they come. She posted a photo once, sunset at the riverbank. Just her, backlit, all warm colors and soft edges, except there was a shadow, way in the background, right near the woodpile. I didn't ask. I screenshotted it, zoomed in until it was just pixels. Still didn't ask. I was too busy studying freight corridors and margin curves in North Dakota and Kansas and Georgia, telling myself I was building something that'd matter one day. She packed my protein bars and left a travel mug on the counter like clockwork, kissed me goodbye and said, "Be careful," while I gave her a distracted thumbs up and an airport code. I knew I was gone too much. I knew it every time I walked into the loft and found it cleaner than I left it. That meant she'd come and gone already. Lived a whole day I wasn't in. We didn't fight. We just didn't overlap. My dad used to say, "Quiet ain't always peaceful." He was right. His name's Stuart, 63. We haven't spoken in almost a decade. His second wife, Stella, liked to rearrange the house every 6 weeks, and my dad liked not getting into it. I was collateral. I learned to shrink. We went on and off during my early 20s. Birthdays, maybe a call at Christmas. But when I turned 26 and sent a letter that came back unopened, I stopped trying. Catherine asked about him once, maybe twice. I said my dad preferred his socket wrenches to his son. She didn't push after that. That's the thing about quiet women. You think they're soft, but they know when to shut a door before it slams. Back at the cabin, she started talking more about the land, the way the porch needed reinforcing, how the roofline might catch drift if we didn't add a brace. She had plans, notes, even drawings. She got good with tools, comfortable. And then came the carport camera. I bought it off a third-party site, installed it on a Tuesday when I swung by to check the gutters. I told her it was for insurance, liability, winter freeze, that kind of thing. I didn't tell her it had a clean angle on the driveway and front stoop. Didn't say it synced with my phone. That's a pattern with me. Doing things, justifying them later. It keeps the narrative manageable. One night while I sat in the loft watching inventory shifts from a Florida seed supplier, I heard her on speakerphone with someone from the center. She was laughing. Really laughing. Not that polite chuckle she used on donors. I muted the TV and listened. She said, "Gage, I'm not climbing up that rafter again. You want the beam painted, you do it yourself." He must have teased her because she laughed again and said, "Bring a ladder, not another story." I clicked mute on the call. Not hers. Mine. I shut the browser. I was watching price per mile charts like they were gospel while she was learning every creak in that cabin floor. Our lives had stopped syncing. Different clocks, different stories. And instead of asking her about it, I bought another sensor. I drove out to the cabin that Friday with the box still in my trunk. I parked half off the gravel shoulder, engine still running, phone screen bright with the latest feed. Camera 2 had kicked in at 11:41 in the morning, sharp, same angle as always, fixed on the side entry by the garden bench. Catherine was inside, radio low, hair up, stirring something in a pot. She looked calm, too calm. Then came the sound that twisted my stomach, the creak of a tailgate. Metal and weight. A man crossed into frame fast, carrying a bundle, head down. No face. Just a worn cap and a jacket the exact shade of army green as the one I wore through college. I knew that color. I knew how it faded in the shoulders after years of wear. My jaw tightened. They hugged in the doorway. Not a handshake. Not a friendly arm tap. Her chin went straight to his shoulder like muscle memory, like she'd done it before. I froze the frame, then backed it up to the carport. On the bench by the door, a sealed pack of men's socks, a box of nicotine lozenges, a folded flannel with a stitched name tag flipped inside out. The kind of bundle you bring when you're staying a while, or moving in. That was it. I shut the screen, called Trent, told him I'd be offline for 90 minutes, then grabbed my coat and bolted down the stairs like I was late for a fire. At the Midtown hardware store, I walked straight to aisle 7, grabbed 2 audio pucks, low frequency, barely detectable, and a dummy motion sensor with just enough blink to pass for live. Paid cash. No receipt. I drove up that night. Told Catherine I had an early site visit in Albany. She didn't question it. Just kissed my cheek and said, "Be safe." Her towel was still on the hook when she stepped into the shower. I moved fast, tucked one puck under the 3rd stair tread, and wedged the dummy sensor behind the pantry flour bin. Synced the pings to match the motion zones I'd already logged. She came out of the bathroom with her hair damp, t-shirt soft and oversized, and curled into bed without a word. I stayed up pretending to check emails while watching the microwave door reflect the person I'd become. I didn't like the angle. In the morning, she made coffee. Said, "Hope Albany's not a mess." "Just a roofing inspection," I answered, grabbing my keys. She handed me a banana, kissed my forehead. "Text me when you get there." I said, "Sure," and walked out like I wasn't 2 seconds from vomiting in the gravel. By the time I hit the turnoff near the lumber mill, camera 1 buzzed. Gage's flatbed. Tan. Dented. Recognizable from half a mile. He parked by the barn and unloaded 3 sheets of plywood and a bundle of cedar shingles. Hauled them toward the shed, turned, and waved. Right into the camera. Oblivious. I pulled over, fast-forwarded. Catherine came home 2 hours later with 2 paper grocery bags and a white pharmacy sack. She moved slower than usual, set the bags on the counter and paused, her back to the camera. One of the pill bottles caught the light, just long enough to see it had a red warning label. I paused, rewound, played it again, still missed the name. I hated myself for caring as much as I did. I replayed the clip of me leaving earlier that morning, the casual kiss, the soft smile. Then I watched the next 2 minutes. Catherine alone at the sink, both hands braced on the counter like she'd been hit and needed to stay upright. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was breathing, deep, measured, the kind of breathing you do when you just made a choice. I opened a new browser tab to look at routing charts and couldn't get past the loading screen. My hands wouldn't stay still. I texted Trent again. Still reachable by text, taking the long way down. He sent a thumbs-up emoji I didn't bother responding to. I gassed up, skipped lunch, and turned the car south. I kept the radio off. Let the road noise grind me down. The excuses lined up in my head like a draft folder I didn't want to open. Maybe the guy was her brother. Maybe it was a neighbor bringing over supplies. Maybe Gage's helper. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But I knew the shape of that hug. I knew the quiet. I knew the kind of silence you keep when you've already decided what not to say. Back at the loft, I couldn't sit still. I opened and closed the same spreadsheet 8 times, eyes darting to the feed like I was checking in on a patient in critical care. The hallway mic picked up footsteps, muffled conversation. A man's voice, low, not quite clear. A cough. Then Catherine again, soft as always. "You doing okay?" The voice answered something I couldn't make out. She laughed. I closed the app, Slid the laptop away. Sat with my fists clenched. Every part of me wanted to drive back and confront her. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not without knowing what exactly I'd be accusing her of. And deep down, I wasn't ready for her answer. I stayed up past 3. No feeds, no emails. Just me, my guilt, and a list of everything I'd said and done to let the distance between us grow wide enough for a stranger to walk through. The next morning, I put in for travel coverage and pulled the loft door shut behind me. I wasn't going to sleep until I saw it for myself. The drive from Albany back to the city felt longer than it should have. I'd left the cabin pretending I was heading to a job site, but my head was still caught on that hug and the way Catherine had stood at the sink afterward. I told myself I'd handle work first, stabilize what I could control. That's how I justify everything. By the time I hit Nebraska, harvest season was in full panic. One of our co-op's routing networks hiccuped mid-deliveries, just stopped syncing orders. The dashboard on my laptop bled from green to amber like a spreading bruise. Phones lit up, farmers yelling about pallets stranded in truck lots, fuel costs ticking up by the minute. Trent pinged me 3 times before I even found a motel that didn't reek of mildew. I patched what I could from that motel desk, half drunk on bad coffee. The fix wasn't complicated. A database key out of sync, easily rewritten. The shame came after, when I realized I cared more about a column of shipment IDs than my wife's face on a frozen camera frame. When I got back to the loft 3 days later, the mail pile on the counter was heavy enough to bow the metal tray. On top sat a thick manila envelope with red stamps screaming delinquent taxes, Riverside parcel. 3/4 overdue, a penalty stacked, and a typed note about a timber buyer interested in acquisition. The deed's in my name. My late aunt left it that way because she said keeping land simple keeps families sane. She was wrong about the second part. My gut said handle it. My head said, why didn't Catherine tell me? I opened our joint account on my laptop. The recent charges lined up like a riddle. County seat, pharmacy, hardware store, diner. No wild spending, no secrets on paper. Just enough small-town pattern to make it look normal, which made it worse. I flipped tabs to the business account before I could stop myself. It was clean. Too clean. And I hated that I'd checked it all. My paranoia was starting to taste metallic, cold, bitter, and constant. Around 5 that evening, my phone buzzed. The cabin cameras again. Gage's tan flatbed parked by the porch. I zoomed the feed and froze. There was a white box in the bed, stamped with bright red warning labels. Medical supply transport. Oxygen tanks? Syringes? I couldn't tell. He unloaded it like he knew what he was doing, carried it through the side door like he'd done it before. I didn't see help. I saw betrayal. That's how a control freak reads tea leaves. I scrolled through my texts with Catherine. The last one was 2 days old. Her message read, staying at the cabin till Friday. Big grant due. Love you. I typed out, need anything? Then stared at it, deleted it, then typed it again, deleted it again, sent nothing. I lasted until 9 that night before I grabbed my keys and drove north. No plan, just questions stacked in the passenger seat. The woods were darker than I remembered when I pulled up the dirt road. Her Subaru wasn't there. The cabin windows glowed low, lamplight, not full power. I stepped inside, careful, half expecting to find that same man sitting at our kitchen table. The air smelled faintly of soup and pine cleaner. Quiet. Too quiet. I checked the bedroom. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. Her toothbrush gone. Under the bed, something caught my light. A black dictaphone, old school, dust-fogged, with batteries crusted white and a label taped on the cassette door. For V. S. I picked it up slow, like it might go off. My thumb hesitated on the play button. The battery door cracked open, corrosion biting the contacts. I found some cotton swabs in the drawer, cleaned what I could, swore at the static that hissed back at me. Nothing. No sound, no clue. Just a broken message from someone who'd used my initial. I went to the counter for my phone and spotted another envelope in the mail tray, This one thinner, folded once, stamped with the county's crest. I tore it open, expecting another late notice, but it wasn't. It was a receipt, bold red letters reading Paid Land Preservation Fund. Different check number, not our account, not my signature. Someone had paid off the lien using outside funds. I stood there, letter in one hand, silent machine in the other, trying to piece together what game I was in and when I'd lost track of the rules. Outside, a night wind pushed through the trees, low and constant, the kind of sound that usually calmed Catherine down. It didn't do a thing for me. I set the dictaphone on the counter, right under the kitchen light where she couldn't miss it when she came back. Thought about writing a note. Something cold, simple. We need to talk. Or maybe something angry. Who is S? But I didn't. I just left it sitting there like bait. As I stepped outside, I caught sight of the old metal mailbox hanging by one screw. A fresh scrape along the latch, like someone had opened it recently, with a key that didn't fit right. Inside was just a takeout menu and a church bulletin about a fundraiser for the Land Preservation Fund. The same fund stamped on the receipt. My pulse went up again. The clouds were low enough to smother the stars. The woods felt too close, the air heavy with the kind of damp that eats through cedar and trust alike. I drove back toward the main road, headlights cutting through the fog. At the last bend, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the cabin light still on. One lamp, steady glow, waiting for her, or maybe for me. Halfway to the highway, I pulled over and killed the engine. My hands wouldn't stay still on the steering wheel. I thought about turning around, going back, asking straight out what was going on. But the thought of her looking me in the eye and lying, if that's what she was doing, felt worse than the not knowing. So I did what I always do when I'm cornered. I left. The next Thursday, just past 6, the dusk feed loaded slow, grainy shadows, low light, camera 3 flickering. Kitchen lights were dim. Catherine moved through the frame, barefoot, sleeves pushed up, pot steaming behind her. Calm. Then I saw him. He stepped out of the hallway bathroom, towel looped around his neck, walking careful on the tile like his balance wasn't back yet. The camera angle caught his profile, lean, upright, older. He moved like he was trying not to fall, or not to be seen. Catherine met him halfway and helped him to the chair by the counter. Her hands went to his boots, slow and practiced. She unlaced one, then the other, like she'd done it before. Like this was routine. For a second I thought maybe he was sick. But then I saw what he was wearing. That jacket. Army green. Worn thin at the elbows. The same kind I used to wear in college, and I paused the feed. Zoomed. The left cuff had a tear near the snap. A little chewed spot I hadn't thought about in years. Back when I was 20, my dog Samson got hold of it. Left his mark there. Nobody else would have noticed that detail. Except me. He touched the cuff with his thumb, slow, almost absent, and smiled like it meant something, like the fabric held a memory. My stomach flipped. I didn't move. I just sat there watching it play out. A few minutes later, a woman appeared at the door, gray hair wrapped tight in a scarf, shoulders squared like she'd just marched across the county. She held a pie tin in one hand and a thin stack of mail in the other. Looked straight into camera 3 like she knew exactly where to look. "Fern," Catherine said, opening the door wide. The mic under the stair caught it clean. I knew that name. From before. One of the community center folks she talked about. Ran food drives. Taught basic accounting to widowed farmers. The kind of person who didn't make small talk without purpose. Fern stepped in like she lived there. Handed the man an envelope and walked straight to the furnace control. "Heat's fine now," she said, tapping the dial like it had misbehaved. The camera mic crackled as I rolled the audio back twice. Then I heard his voice, low, muttering to himself the same way he used to when patching drywall or tuning the carb on the old truck. "I'll try again tomorrow, kid." That one word landed hard, clean and simple. Kid. He used to call me that even after I was taller than him, even after I'd stopped answering his calls. He called me that when we built the porch swing together, when I got my first check from the company, when I told him not to come to my wedding if Stella planned on showing up. The man in the camera frame had my old jacket, my dad's voice, and a silence that made my ears ring. I stared at the pixelated blur where his face should have been, but the cap brim stayed low, and the damn hallway shadows worked like they were doing him a favor. Catherine steadied him as Fern packed up her scarf and turned for the door. She didn't flinch. Not once. Outside, Gage's flatbed rolled in again, like clockwork. He parked half in the lane, hopped down with a bag of rock salt on his shoulder. He gave the place a glance, chin-lifted Catherine a hello, carried the salt inside without seeing what it set off inside me. They all moved like this was normal. I hit mute on the audio feed and sat back. Trent had pinged me about a quarterly strategy call, something about new co-op onboarding in Iowa, but I didn't even open the message. Instead, I typed back one line: need 48 hours. Family. I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb, silenced Slack, shut the lid on my laptop. Then I gassed up the car, filled a travel mug with black coffee, and headed north. My jaw was locked the entire drive, teeth tight, knuckles red around the wheel. I wasn't going to ask nicely this time. I wasn't walking in circles anymore. Whoever that man was, sick, broken, silent, I needed to see his eyes. The last time I stood in the same room as Stuart Corbin was 9 years ago. He'd stood in the kitchen, arms folded, telling me to make peace for the sake of the house. I told him I didn't owe Stella anything, and I sure didn't owe her respect. He said, "Sometimes family isn't about winning." I said, "Then you can have her." That was the end. But now here he was, maybe, wearing my jacket, in my house, being cared for by my wife like he belonged. And Catherine? She knew. She had to. She called him by name, helped him lace boots, took mail from Fern without blinking. That's what burned worst. She'd looked me in the eye last week, said love you, and left out the part where my estranged father might be sleeping in our cabin. No warning, no explanation. Just secrets stacked in the pantry and tucked under the stairs. The gas station near the interstate had a busted pump screen, so I paid inside. The clerk made some joke about deer crossing too early this year. I nodded like I heard him and drove off without answering. Every mile felt like a tightening knot in my chest. Halfway there, the sky dropped low with clouds, and I flipped the wipers once out of habit. The cabin road was slick with fresh mud. Someone had come through recently. Deep tracks from Gage's truck, maybe. I parked behind the barn and killed the engine. For a full minute, I didn't move. Just watched the porch light flicker against the trees. Then I stepped out into the cold, pulled my coat tight, and walked straight to the front door. No more watching. It was time to knock. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open with my knuckles, stepped inside, and found Catherine at the sink, sleeves rolled, a saucepan steaming behind her. She didn't flinch, didn't look surprised, just stirred slow like she'd been waiting for me. I walked straight to the table and set my phone down. The screen lit up. Grainy footage paused on the hug in the kitchen, her head on that man's shoulder. I left it there like evidence in a trial. "We need to talk," I said. She turned, looked down at the phone, then back at me. Her eyes didn't go wide. They narrowed just a bit, and I could almost see the thoughts moving behind them. I watched her decide what not to say first. "I love you," she said quietly. "I've been keeping a promise I shouldn't have kept." My jaw tensed. "A promise to who?" "I'll show you." "No, say it." "Who is he?" She didn't answer. Just stepped toward the pantry, grabbed something from the drawer, then walked to the table and laid it all out like it was nothing. 2 pill bottles, the jacket I knew too well, the dictaphone I'd left on the counter, cleaned but dead. Then she held out her hand. I didn't want to take it, but I did. My fingers closed around hers before my brain caught up. She pulled me gently toward the table and pointed to the items like she was building a timeline. I found him in February, she said. He was living in a trailer 2 counties over, skinny, sick, stubborn as a stump. He asked me not to tell you until he could stand up straight. Found who, I said, already knowing, already hearing it in my gut. The screen door creaked open behind me, and I turned just in time to see Fern Talbot step in with a pie tin in her hands and that steady look people from small towns wear when they're bracing. "I can come back," she said, "or I can say what's true." I didn't move, couldn't speak. Then a shadow stretched across the doorway. A man stepped through, slow, like his legs weren't all the way reliable. He took off his cap with both hands, and there he was. Stuart Corbin, my father, thinner, grayer, face carved tighter than I remembered, but the eyes were the same, that same mix of tired and proud and way too late. He wore the jacket, my jacket, left cuff still chewed through and frayed. He stood with his hat in both hands like a boy who just broke a neighbor's window and didn't have the guts to run. "Vince," he said. "That's it. Just my name. No speech. No story. Just a man with nothing left to offer but that." I didn't say a word. Couldn't. My hand was pressed to the table edge hard enough for the wood to bite into my palm. My chest was too tight. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was stuck in something worse. Fern crossed to the stove and dropped the pie tin on the counter like this was a church social. Then the door creaked again. Gage stepped halfway in, a box of furnace filters in one arm, the other reaching to shut the door behind him. "Wrong time?" he asked, scanning the room. He saw my face and froze. His eyes flicked to Catherine, then to Stuart, then back to me. He didn't ask a damn thing. Just nodded once like he understood exactly what moment he'd walked into, then stepped back out and pulled the door shut. The silence that followed felt like a balloon stretched too tight. Catherine's voice cut through it, still calm, still grounded. "Sit," she said, looking at both of us. "No speeches. I'll tell you the story. Then you can both talk." I didn't sit right away. Neither did he. But she didn't blink. She didn't budge. She just stared us both down like she wasn't about to let this moment turn into another wasted year. I moved first. Dragged out the nearest chair, sat down, hands still clenched. Stuart followed. Slower. He pulled out the chair across from me, placed his cap in his lap, and looked at the table instead of me. Catherine took the third seat between us. The pot on the stove hissed, and Fern stirred it like background music, not speaking, not leaving. I finally found my voice, not strong, not loud. "Why didn't you tell me?" Catherine didn't flinch. "Because I made a mistake. I kept a promise I didn't fully understand, and then I ran out of good moments to break it." My father looked up. His voice was quieter now, rough. "I didn't want to come to you crawling," I snapped. "You came through the back door." He nodded. "Didn't feel like I had the right to the front." I looked at Catherine again. "You helped him hide?" She didn't argue. "I helped him stand." I shook my head. "You made me feel crazy." "I know. You let me watch." "I didn't know about the cameras," she said. "Not until last week." "I told her yesterday," Fern said from the stove. Stuart rubbed the cuff of the jacket. "I told her not to tell you until I could split firewood again. I wanted to face you like a man, not a ghost." "You left me a long time ago," I said. "You had your shot." "I know," he said, "but I still came back." My hands shook. Catherine reached for the dictaphone. "He recorded something the day he moved in. He wanted to try again. He just didn't know how." I stared at the machine. I couldn't bring myself to hit play. Fern handed me a spoonful of soup, like I was a guest in my own home. "Eat first," she said. "You'll fight better with salt in your system." I almost laughed. I didn't. I took the spoon, swallowed hard, and waited for the rest. Catherine sat straight in her chair, legs crossed at the ankle, hands on her knees like she was giving a board presentation. Except this one didn't come with slides, just the truth. She looked at me, then Stuart, then back to me. "I was on a home visit in February," she said. "Client didn't answer the door. Neighbor waved me over and said a man had fallen on his steps 2 nights back and hadn't gone anywhere since. I knocked. He told me to leave. I didn't." She paused. Not for effect, just to breathe. He had a wheeze that didn't stop, and pride so thick I could barely see past it. Trailer was cold. Mailbox said Corbin. I blinked once. She kept going. "He told me he'd had pneumonia in December, then slipped on ice in January. Walked like his hip was glass. Had 2 cans of soup left, and 1 cigarette lighter that barely sparked." I glanced at Stuart. He didn't lift his eyes from the table. "He didn't say your name," she said, "but he said he'd fouled things up with his son and didn't deserve to fix it easy. He wore the guilt like a coat. I didn't need a name." Stuart's fingers tightened around the brim of his hat, still silent. "Stella left him 2 years ago. Took the car, left a note, never came back. He didn't tell me that part until week 3. Said she liked measuring love in rooms and she didn't like how small his had gotten." I swallowed hard. No one looked at me. "I got him to the clinic. Told them he was a veteran, which wasn't a lie, and that he had no insurance, which was. Paid out of pocket that day. Then I drove him here. He didn't want a shelter. Heater was shot in the trailer, and he wouldn't take charity." "Let me guess," I said. "You offered the cabin because it's mine, but I don't use it?" Her voice stayed calm. "Because it was empty most weekdays and quiet enough for him to recover. That's all." I glanced at Fern. She nodded like she'd already heard this story 10 times. "He made me promise," Catherine said. "Said he wouldn't stay if I told you. Said he'd leave the second he could walk steady if I broke it. He didn't want you to see him until he could stack firewood without shaking." "And you thought that was noble?" I asked, sharper than I meant. "No," she said. "I thought it was a dumb, prideful man asking for something I couldn't justify but also couldn't refuse." I stood, walked 2 steps, then sat back down. My skin was tight on my face, like I was sunburned from the inside. "The men's stuff?" I asked. "The socks, the lozenges, the flannel?" "I bought them," she said. "Boots, too. The jacket? He found it, in a box marked garage crap from your old apartment. He asked if he could keep it. I didn't recognize it." "That chewed cuff," I muttered. "Samson did that." "I figured it was a dog," Stuart said quietly. "And the medical box?" I added. "Nebulizer," Catherine said. "Clinic prescribed it after the 3rd coughing fit. The lozenges were his idea. Said if he was going to live under your roof again, he didn't want to smell like a chimney." "And Gage?" Catherine leaned back slightly. "I never lied about Gage. He helped, hauled wood, fixed a beam, never asked questions. Fern told him the man needed dignity. That was enough." I looked to Fern. She didn't blink. "Not my first secret," she said, "but hopefully my last." "And the lien," I said. "The county tax notice. You were going to let that just pile up?" "I wrote a grant to the Land Preservation Fund in March," Catherine said. "Matched it with a church fundraiser Fern helped organize. I paid the arrears under your parcel number. Filed a hardship waiver." I stared at her. "You paid the property tax behind my back." "I prevented a land buyout while you were in Kansas arguing about pallet returns. You're welcome." My hand hit the table. Not hard, but hard enough to feel like something had to give. "I saw the receipts," I said. "County office, diner, hardware store, pharmacy. I thought—" "I know what you thought," she said. "That's the thing about secrets. They don't just protect people. They rot trust like wet wood." She reached into the side drawer and pulled out the dictaphone. "He recorded this the night he made me promise," she said, sliding it toward me. "New batteries. You don't have to listen. But if you don't, I'm not explaining it again. Stuart reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My name was on the outside. Same slanted handwriting I'd mimicked in school when I forged signatures on late slips. I wrote too, he said. Didn't know which way it'd go, so I covered both. I stared at the letter. I didn't take it yet. I hit play on the recorder first. His voice came through the tiny speaker, older and raspier but still stubborn as ever. Vince, the voice said. I don't know if I ever said I'm sorry out loud, so I'll say it now, even if you never hit play. I picked peace over truth for too long. I let Stella call the plays. I let her define your space. I thought it was easier. I was wrong. I wanted to fix it clean. But the truth is messy, so here it is. I screwed up. I miss you. If I can't stand in front of you when you hear this, I still wanted you to hear me. The tape clicked off. The room was dead still. Stuart slid the folded paper toward me across the table. I opened it. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. Kid, I made you prove yourself to earn a place you already had. I'm ashamed. If I don't get to say it while I'm breathing, I'm saying it now. Dad? I folded it once and put it in my jacket pocket. Catherine rubbed her palms against her jeans, like her hands had finally started to shake. I didn't do this to hurt you, she said. I was trying to get you both to the table alive. That's it. No romance, no thriller, just stubborn men and a dumb promise. I looked at her, then at him. Then I reached for the letter again, just to feel it in my hand. I didn't forgive. Not yet. But I didn't leave either. I looked across the table at Catherine, and for the first time all week, the noise in my head went quiet. No camera feeds, no static. Just her, tired but unshaken. I'm sorry, I said, for the spying and for the stories I told myself. She didn't rush to answer, just let me sit there and stew in it, like she was measuring how deep I meant it. Then she nodded once. You get one pass, she said, not two. Those pucks go tonight. I got up before the conversation could tilt, pulled out the toolkit, went under the stairs, unscrewed the trim, pulled the puck from the beam. Pantry next, tucked behind the flour bin. Last one in the carport rafters. That one had dust on it. I laid them all out on the kitchen table like some forensic exhibit. Wires coiled, batteries dead or nearly. They looked small now, weak, like little lies I could finally admit to. Stuart watched quietly from the couch, one hand on a chipped mug, the other rubbing that chewed cuff like it held a clock he couldn't rewind. Later that night, after Catherine went to bed, I poured 2 fingers of rye into a glass and sat across from him. I was 17, I said. Father's Day. Bought you a grill set. Cheap one from Walgreens. His eyes flicked to mine. You never showed, I said. Stepmom wanted to go to Atlantic City. I waited 4 hours, left the gift on the porch. He didn't blink, just winced, like the memory touched something that hadn't healed. I opened that box 2 years later, I said. Still wrapped, still had the receipt in it. He nodded once. I remember. Stella said you'd understand. Yeah, I muttered. I did. He took a long breath, exhaled through his nose. Christmas that same year, I sat in the truck outside your place. She said you needed boundaries. I stayed out there for 90 minutes, watched the porch light blink like maybe it was a sign. We both sat there. No one touched their drink. I let her tell me what a father should be, he said. Turns out she had no clue. Yeah, well, I said, we both picked stupid hilltops to die on. Next morning I texted Trent, told him I'd be missing the board prep call. Didn't ask permission. One word. Family. He replied inside 2 minutes. About time. Before lunch I found a glossy door hanger stuck to the porch. Timber buyer, bold red print, smiling logo. Promised fast cash for unwanted land and assistance with liens. Had the nerve to leave it 2 days after we filed the appeal. I tossed it in my glove box next to the first aid kit, planning to hand it over with a formal complaint. I drove down to the county office that afternoon, appeal in hand. Walked right up to the counter and asked for Darlene, the clerk Catherine mentioned. She was small, sharp-eyed, wearing a knit cardigan with ducks on the sleeves. I handed over the paperwork, grant copy, fundraiser list, Catherine's letter about the property status. She read every page. No rush. Then she looked at me and said, "You Corbin's boy?" I nodded. "Unfortunately, yeah." She smiled without softening. "He did good raising you. He just didn't finish the job." She stamped the file and said, "Fees waived. We'll update the parcel records by Friday." Before I could leave, she leaned in and added, "Tell your wife her grant application made half this office tear up. She's the reason we started the land match fund." That almost cracked something in me. Almost. On the way back, I stopped at a UPS store near the edge of town. Bought a plain envelope and wrote out one line on white paper. "You don't get to write our story anymore. Don't call." I folded it clean. Slipped in a photocopy of Dad's apology letter. Didn't sign it. Addressed it to Stella's old P.O. box, the one she used when she wanted to disappear but still get catalogs. Dropped it in the slot and didn't look back. That night, Fern knocked once and walked in like she lived there. Carried a tin of rolls and a slip of paper with a quote scribbled on it. "Men like you two always think you're the storm," she said, handing the rolls to Catherine. "Sometimes you're the bridge." Then she winked and walked right back out into the cold. Stuart went out to the shed just after dark, said he needed to find something. Came back 20 minutes later holding a battered coffee can like it was a treasure chest. He set it on the table, popped the lid, and pulled out a red walkie-talkie. The kind I'd begged for when I was 10. The antenna was chipped, the clip on the back broken off. "I kept this," he said, "even after Stella told me to toss the box." I turned it over in my hands. The plastic was cold and scratched. I could almost hear my younger voice calling base to Treefort, like I was still up in that sycamore behind the garage. I didn't cry. Not then. Not later. I just held it. Let the weight of it settle in my palm like something old that still worked. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I still did too. The potluck was on a Saturday. Bright skies and a muddy lot full of pickups and hand-painted signs taped to folding chairs. Catherine hates a fuss. She said we didn't need to be there, didn't want attention, didn't need thanks. I told her we were just dropping off paper goods. She rolled her eyes but packed a stack of napkins anyway. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon, diesel, and pride. Maybe 40 people lined the wall, kids chasing each other near the raffle table, old-timers shuffling chairs, crock-pots steaming along 2 plastic tables. Someone waved us toward the sign-in sheet. I ignored it. When the center director clanged a fork against a plate and said, "Before we eat, one of our landowners has something to say," I stepped up. Catherine looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. I didn't clear my throat or stall. I just said it. This place matters to me, and I almost lost it without knowing. I was out chasing numbers while someone else made sure the roof stayed up and the taxes got paid. Catherine wrote the grant that saved the parcel. She ran the fundraiser. She made sure none of this land ended up in the wrong hands. I paused, looked at her. She stared at her shoes. She saved the place you all make me proud to say is mine. Quiet, then one person clapped, then another. It built, slow but solid. I turned to a man in a slick fleece vest by the bulletin board. He'd been eyeing the room like a realtor at a funeral. "You with Timber South?" I asked. He blinked. "I'm just, here to connect with landowners. You can stop leaving helpful notes on elderly properties. You try it again, I'll file with the state attorney general." Fern clapped once, loud, sharp. That was enough. The vest guy shrank down and slid toward the exit without finishing his sweet tea. Later, behind the shed where the air smelled like rust and leaves, I found Gage checking the oil on his generator. I didn't make it a whole speech. "Thanks," I said, "for hauling and keeping your mouth shut." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Catherine said the man needed dignity," he said. "That's all." It was simple. No drama, no defense, just how real people work when they're not trying to impress you. At dusk, Dad and I walked the back fence line. The wind dropped enough for the frogs to start up near the creek. He pointed his chin at the southwest post, leaning like a drunk. "We'll fix that Sunday," he said. We did. Cemented it in clean, tightened the wire, didn't rush, didn't fill the silence with anything we didn't mean. Afterward, we sat on the porch steps, sweat drying on our necks, water bottles warm. He looked down the hill, then said, "Stella used to collect your letters off the porch." I didn't answer. "She'd forget to give them to me," he said. "Or say she already had. I didn't push it. That's on me." I nodded once. Didn't give him a pass. But I didn't turn away either. I told him about the private equity pitch we'd turned down last quarter. Big offer, all flash, none of the backbone we built the company on. They would have gutted the co-ops for fast return. I told him I said no. He gave one of those half smiles like he recognized the decision from some earlier version of himself. Inside, Catherine and Fern sat close at the folding table, chili bowls half eaten, laughing about something I couldn't hear. Their laughter didn't sound tired anymore. It sounded finished, like whatever they'd carried was finally laid down. As we packed up to leave, Gage swung by with a bundle of kindling and a brown paper bag. Set it on the stoop. Inside was a replacement snap for the chewed cuff and a note in thick block letters. "Figured you'd want it fixed." That hit harder than it should have. I'd spent a year building stories around the guy. Jealousy, suspicion, worst-case ideas. Turns out he was just a good neighbor with a socket set and better boundaries than me. As we pulled out of the lot, Catherine sat quiet beside me. Streetlights passed across her face, soft and orange. She rested one hand on her belly like she wasn't even thinking about it, like it was instinct. And I had a feeling we were already on a road longer than either of us had mapped out. And this time, I was ready to drive all of it. Back at the loft, I stood in the doorway and pulled the last feed off my phone. The app glitched once, then cleared. Gone. I dropped the cameras, every one of them, into a cardboard box and left it by the door. No label, no duct tape, just sitting there like a dare I didn't plan to take back. Catherine was in the kitchen, barefoot, kettle already starting to hiss. She poured the water, made 2 mugs, and pushed one toward me without a word. We stood across the counter like referees, middle of the field, waiting for the next whistle. "I'm sorry," I said again, "for the spying, for the stories I told myself, for hiding instead of asking." She didn't let me off the hook. "You don't get to be a good man in the world and a coward at home," she said. "Pick the first one and prove it here too." "Yes, ma'am," I said, and meant it. "Teach me how to ask first." She walked around the counter and leaned her weight on my shoulder. Not soft, just solid. Present. "You'll mess up again," she said. "But not like that. Not if you can help it." I nodded. I told Stella not to call again. Sent her a copy of Dad's letter with it. Filed the appeal with Darlene. Fee's gone. I'm setting up a life estate on the cabin for Dad. Gives him dignity on paper. For real this time. "Good," she said, and sipped her tea. "I owe Gage an apology too," I added, "for the stories I wrote in my head." She gave a short laugh through her nose. "He'll settle for a sandwich and you not calling him Chief." I stepped into the living room, grabbed the old dictaphone off the shelf, and set it on the coffee table. "We'll keep it," I said, "so our kid hears his grandfather's voice someday, if he wants to." Catherine looked at me with something steady. Not a smile, exactly. More like recognition. "About that," she said, taking my hand. "Remember those 2 days we stole out there in late spring?" I nodded. "Yeah." They took. Took a second for it to click. When it did, I didn't say anything smart. I just wrapped my arms around her and held her like I could keep every cell of us in one place. "You sure?" I asked, and immediately regretted how it sounded. But I needed to hear it. She nodded. 2 tests. Very calm doctor. We're at 8 weeks. I laughed. It wasn't pretty. It was real. The kind of laugh that comes from the center of your chest and leaves the air lighter after it leaves. My phone buzzed on the table. Trent. Board moved. You're clear this week. I turned the phone face down and didn't touch it again. I picked it back up to make one call. Dad answered after one ring. Kid? That word hit different now. You're going to be a grandfather, I said. He didn't speak for a long beat. Then his voice cracked just enough to say, Tell that girl I owe her 100 thank yous. You can tell her yourself Sunday, I said, after we fix that back step. I'll bring the screws, he said. I believed him. We finished our tea. No big speeches, no cleanup needed. When the sun came up, I got out of bed and moved the box of cameras to the curb. Didn't look back, didn't need to. Quick thing before you scroll. Can I ask you something real? If someone tried to make things right after years of silence, would you let them in or lock the door for good? If you've got hype, go ahead and tap it. It really helps this story reach more people. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. It's just one click, but makes a big difference. And drop a comment, whether it's good story or your own take. I'd love to hear what you think.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.